Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders. And the dust is just about settling from a week of post-budget live Q&A sessions, which you may have well joined us for. And if you were there, then you would have heard some expert insights from different industry figures, including Jeremy Harbour, Shaz Nawaz, Stuart Scott, Manish Kataria, Kirsty Darkins, and Susie Carter, all joined, of course, by our very own Kevin Whelan. So firstly, I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of our guests and to those of you who joined us. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to bring you some of the key questions that the Wealth Builders community were asking, along with the answers from our experts. And if you didn't catch the live sessions, then don't worry. We've recorded them and they're available for free right now, along with our own budget guide. So to get your hands on those, head to www.wealthbuilders.co.uk/budget-breakdowns, or you can click on the show notes and you'll see the link there as well. So this week, we've pulled out some of the questions that we received around pensions and inheritance tax, and there were plenty of them. And if you're concerned about your pensions or you're feeling uncertain on what actions you should be taking to create, build and protect your wealth following the autumn budget announcement, then do book a free discovery call with our team. Simply head to www.wealthbuilders.co.uk/discovery call and pick a time that works best for you. All right, then let's head over now to Kevin and the first of our budget breakdown questions.
A number of IHT issues, weren't there, with farms, the IHT issue of pensions, all pensions, including SIPPs, SSAS, pensions, not defined benefit pensions, because defined benefit pensions never had an inheritance transfer anyway, yet still people rave about their final salary pensions as being wonderful. So it's only in 2015 when the law changed to make pensions essentially much more flexible and transferable on death, because before that you had obligations to buy annuities and things like that. So I think it's definitely a bad bit of news as far as pensions are concerned, and all pensions are affected. Some people have thought, well, because a pension is a family trust, a SAS is a family trust, small self-administered scheme. For those who don't know what a SAS is, it's a pension for business owners, really. They think it escapes the inheritance tax position. It doesn't. You're still caught in that loop. But two things to say about all pensions. One, there's never inheritance tax to pay between husband and wife, spouses. And the other point to say is, we've got 2 years worth of planning to have a look at what they're trying to do. And 2 years is, decent enough time. And one point to note about SAS that many people don't know. So if you've got a SIPP or a conventional pension, take a look at a SAS if you've got a limited company, because with a SAS where you've got multiple members, then you can do something called earmarking, which means you can almost assign the growth and the income between different members of the scheme. So over a long-term play, and you can bring children in to a SAS at age 18, then you've got the opportunity to start to potentially nudge benefits from you if you've got a large pension or you're building a large one and you want to nudge some of that growth in a different direction to the next generation. But Manish, I'm fully behind you that the value of pensions isn't diminished, because the purpose of the pensions is to build wealth, and wealth comes from recurring income. So the recurring income is for you, for your life, because at some point, working in a job, working in a business, it's going to end. So having an income stream that gives you certainty, control, not just over investments, but also over fees, is still a massive benefit. When you think about corporation tax relief, 25%, that's fixed now for the duration. So instead of taking money out and paying the 25% corporation tax first, you don't have to pay corporation tax on pension contributions. In fact, it's relief. Number two, if you take money out as salary, you're going to have tax to pay and more NI. So you need to review how you're drawing money from your business, that's important. But also, if you take it as dividends, which most people do, because that avoids national insurance, you're going to pay dividend tax. And if you're in high rate, you're going to be paying nearly 40% in that, plus the corporation tax. So you've got mountains of tax going already. If you take money and put it into a pension scheme, a SIPP or a SAS, then you're not having to pay that dividend tax. And with SAS, you get access to the money. You can lend some of that money back to your company, which means you can build wealth with it. So you're building wealth pre-tax instead of post-tax. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So while I'm devastated, I am genuinely, you can see that I've talked about legacy long enough. I planned for my pension not to be necessarily needed, but, it's a large pension, certainly north of $1 million. And that means, where the lifetime allowance was previously, which means if I wanted to leave that money to my children as part of that, that's a more difficult challenge now. If you're a property owner, you're probably an investor, you're probably a SAS owner, or you might be a SAS owner, or certainly might have a pension. So all of these things will overlay. I'm going to field a question which has come in about large pensions and IHT. Well, I was not happy about that one, Shaz, I have to say. So the fact that historically pensions have always been a super tax efficient vehicle at many levels, and they still are to a certain degree. Corporation tax relief or personal income tax relief, so that's great. Secondly, no capital gains tax on any growth, that's great. 25% tax-free cash, that's great. Marginal income tax when you draw money out, acceptable. But it's always been for the money purchase pots, people taking the risk, if you like, rather than the final salary pots. So those taking the risk always had that option of this being a next generation plan as well as an income plan. And of course, Rachel Reeves has said two things really that I don't like very much, just in terms of what was said. Number one, business owners, suck it up, just make less profit. You'll deal with the NI problem. And as far as the pension is concerned, we've just closed a loophole we didn't like. Well, whenever you close a loophole, whenever people have been promised something, which was tax relief, we know that individuals are forced to pay into pensions through workplace pensions. So it's not a choice. You're forced to do that. The idea that you can't pass on benefits any longer to the next generation. There's never inheritance tax to pay between spouses. We know that. But the second generation, her argument, understand the argument, which is a pension is for building an income and you should use your pension entirely for the purposes of that. And look, I understand the argument, but I think the big challenge for me is people who've been planning their pensions for decades, like me. Historically, you would have like lifetime allowance, that was a tax that came in, or a potential tax anyway, said, well, look, we're going to limit pensions now to £1 million because there's not many of you with big pension pots. So we're going to limit it to £1 million and you're going to pay more tax beyond that. But if you've got more than £1 million, we'll recognise where you are now. In other words, they gave recognition to the planning that people had done. They've removed that basically and said from April 2027, you're going to be taxed on anything that's unspent on second death, basically. Or if you don't have a spouse, where there isn't an automatic, completely inheritance tax-free. So everybody's going to be affected. Now, I know there was a lot in the budget previously, a lot politically anyway, about doctors and the lifetime allowance. But doctors, dentists, people in the public sector have got final salary pension schemes, and those are benefit-driven pension schemes, so they're not money in a pot. So if you die, what happens in schemes like that, 50% of the income of the benefit, typically 50%, gets paid to a spouse, but there's nothing paid to children after the age of 23. So it was never an inheritance tax plan. But of course, as I said, they didn't have to take a risk, whereas those of us with money purchase pots have taken the risk. And I think, I'm not happy with what's gone on there. But I would say, though, I am pleased I've got a SSAS, because as I've got a SSAS, I've got the option, just like we did with lifetime allowance, that I can earmark. So there's a word there, earmark. So with earmarking, it means if I've got myself, my wife, and 3 grown-up children in a SSAS, I can make a decision, as long as it's carefully and properly documented, that I would like to have the lower returning assets in my pot and make the higher returning assets into pots of my other members, which could be next generation. So there is a way that you can gradually, and I say gradually because it isn't something you can do. You can't just take your pot and say, I'm going to give that to my son or daughter. You can't do that. But you can gradually change growth. So there are some things you can do. And of course, we've got 2 years to consult on it, to do the best we can to lobby and try and influence, because I saw something today in the press that said 90% tax on pensions, because if they tax you at 40% on inheritance and then tax also the recipients if they draw money as an income, it could be a huge tax bill. I don't honestly think that will happen. I think they'll recognize that as a headline. I think there will be a focus on getting the inheritance tax, which is 40%, and not getting a double layer of taxes. Unintended consequences sometimes happen, but I think we've got 2 years to plan this. So if people like me and others lend our weight to the thinking. So if you've got some thoughts, if you've got some ideas, or if you think you're affected, and by the way, anybody in this room who's got a pension at all, and we had 700 people register for this, if you've got a pension, you're going to be affected. Can I transfer part of a SIPP into a SSAS because some part of the SIPP is tied? Well, yes, you can. So you can transfer any part of any pension, whether it's a SIPP or even a workplace pension. So if you've got a limited company and you've done some research and you think SSAS is a good fit for you, then you can even transfer your workplace pension as long as the scheme allows it. Sometimes the scheme doesn't know they allow it because nobody's ever asked them the question. So, we can help with that. But, we had one with Bank of America where we had somebody wanted to transfer just over $500,000. And they said, oh, no, we don't do that. Yeah, but they did. Because, we asked a bit more of a detailed question as to what precedent was this and why would they knowingly restrict someone's pension choices and a whole bunch of other things. But usually there's a limit, like a minimum limit, that says how much do I need to keep in this scheme for it to be open to me? So because you want to keep getting your employer contributions, of course you do. And sometimes that's like as low as 1,000. So say you've got 100,000 your workplace pension, you want to transfer that to a SSAS, you could transfer 99, leave the one in there, keep getting the contributions, and then do the very same thing the following year. One of our members had the very clever plan where he purchased a uninhabitable property because he couldn't get a mortgage on it, but directly through a loan back from his SSAS because he basically used his own bank. And then, very smart man that he is, got the local council to lend him interest-free 40 grand to bring the property up to spec. And then so the pension not only funded the property, but then when he paid himself back from the refinance, he's got a bigger pension and an extra piece of property, give or take £1,000 a month on top. So, another reason just to be aware that sometimes you can be very smart in what you're doing in combined strategies. A couple of questions I've had on SSAS. Can a one-man consultancy limited company be used to set up a SSAS? Absolutely. So basically, in order to set up a SSAS, I think you really need 4 things. You need to be willing to take responsibility. You need to be a director of your own limited company. You need to have a pension or willingness to make contributions and a plan, which means you've got to be involved. The SSAS is not a innocent bystander, delegate, abdicate, hope for the best kind of a plan. It's a plan for entrepreneurs. It's for people like me, people like Shaz, people like I've seen on the room, like Bronwyn, I can see in the corner of my eye. I can see people who have taken that responsibility, grabbed that money with both hands and shaken it up. And instead of just leaving it on the stock market to go up, go down, go sideways, they've used that money to do what they want to do, not what I ask them to do, but what they want to do, and build their wealth accordingly. And yes, we're going to have to get to look at inheritance tax a bit more, but it gives you the option to grow your money in a much more effective way. So if you're a one-man person, yeah, you can. You could invite somebody else in, a spouse, a partner, business partner. You don't have to have more than one person. And it's not about learning to be a pension administrator. Sometimes people think self-administration, the word small, self-administration, I have to administer my own. No, you don't. You have to direct it in the same way as you direct your company, the same way as you direct building a property portfolio, the same way as you direct your wealth. You don't need to be an expert. You just need to know there are experts around you who can help, which is, part of the core of all of this. So as far as one more point on SSAS, and I'll come to you, Shaz, is if I've got a SIPP with Standard Life or any other company, can I move it to a SSAS? And the answer is yes, you can. And a SSAS can do anything a SIPP can do. And more often than not, if you've got a decent sized pot, you can do so more cheaply because you're not paying a percentage like you pay in a traditional pension where you're paying 1%, 2%. You're just paying fixed administration fees. So we are brokers of SSAS essentially at WealthBuilders. So we'll match the right SSAS provider to you based on your situation, how many trustees, what your plan is, and so on. It's a good question, actually. It's an interesting one. So it's about inheritance tax. And it says, if my pot has got a sum of money in it, and mostly it's in property, a commercial property, because you can't hold residential property in a SSAS. So let's say I've got a commercial property, and that's mostly what it is. And then death occurs. There's no liquidity. How am I going to pay the tax? That's the problem, right? So you've got to work out how to pay the tax, Ordinarily, you get 6 months to pay it. So you're going to have to find money to pay for it. And that's a challenge but we don't know that. We'll have to wait for the consultation period. And which relates to another question, which is you can hold. So a SSAS can hold money or it can facilitate. So if you're holding, you've got to hold commercial property. You can develop commercial to residential, or as I gave the example earlier on, with somebody who loaned money. SSAS is the only scheme that can lend money to the sponsoring employer, the company that sets it up, say your property trading company, for example, and then you can lend that money to your company, and then that company can go off and buy residential property with it. But it's not the SSAS who owns it. The SSAS has made a loan to facilitate it, then it gets paid interest, and then in the end, capital back to it. And there's some formulas and some practices you've got to follow. So can't hold residential property in your SSAS, but it can facilitate it if that's what you want to do. Manish, give us a highlight. Let's pick up the energy. Give us a highlight from the budget.
So in a funny kind of way, one of the biggest highlights for me was that, there was lots of speculation before the event, right? So there were lots of scare stories, lots of rumors. And in fact, tragically, I heard people were sort of acting on some of the rumors and the speculation. Just to give you one example, I heard people were dipping into their pensions to take advantage of their tax-free pensions in the fear that that was going to be abolished, right? The 25% was going to change. So I guess, one of the biggest highlights for me was what didn't change. Right? There was so much out there which was supposed to have got worse, and it didn't. So I think these days, with all that's going on, I think we have to count that as a positive to say, hey, look, some of the really sort of attractive benefits of which are essentially free gifts, right? So the tax wrappers, we're talking about ISAs, we're talking about pensions. Yes, there was a change to the IHT position on pensions, which I'm sure we might cover later on, but the basic attraction of a pension at the point of entry is still there, right? There is no lifetime allowance that is confirmed to be abolished. The £60,000 we can contribute into our pension every year, it's an amazing free gift. It really is. And, we're talking thousands in free money per annum, which we should really try and make the most of if we can. That's still there, right? So at the point of entry, pensions are still a very, very attractive vehicle. So yeah, that was my highlight, Kevin, really, the fact that all of the biggest fears didn't materialize.
Yes, and many people know I have an IFA practice, and we were inundated with calls for people speculating about the tax-free cash, and many took it anyway. And in fact, across the industry, probably billions of pounds, I haven't seen the figure, but probably billions left the stock market and ended up, in the pockets of others. Now, of course, it's back in their estate, but doesn't necessarily affect it because IHT now affects pensions. And again, yes, we will talk about that. But it's knee-jerk reactions before the event, always dangerous. And also ISA allowances kept, still got your 20,000, still got your 9,000 junior ISA. So lots of good reasons to continue thinking that, yes, while the budget's trying to raise taxes, we still have responsibility to build wealth. So what are we going to do? Just throw our hands up in the air and say, woe is me? No, we have to do something.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and that was just really a taster of the full sessions that we hosted last week. And if you'd like to get access to all of those, don't forget to head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/budget-breakdowns, and you can click the link in today's show notes to get access to that, along with our Wealth Builders budget guide. So we'll be back next week, and next week we'll be focusing on some of the questions that our Wealth Builders community had around property. So we had some great guests speaking about residential and commercial property and the tax implications around that. So don't forget to tune in next week. We'll see you same time, same place. See ya.